The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days straight in downtown Seattle, but that morning, it felt different. The clouds didn't just hang heavy. They looked like they carried the weight of someone's sorrow. On the corner of Fifth Avenue and Pine, a young man stood beneath the dull glow of a flickering streetlight. His name was Ethan Clark, 27, a man whose eyes had forgotten what it meant to dream. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the collar of his worn-out jacket, the fabric damp from the drizzle. He wasn't waiting for a friend or a lover. He was waiting for a miracle, though he no longer believed in them. He had been walking toward the job interview that might decide whether he'd finally get a second chance or sink deeper into the quiet desperation he'd lived with for months. Every step toward that glass building made his chest tighter, his doubts louder. He had lost too much already. His parents in a car crashed 2 years ago. His fiancée walking away when the grief turned him into someone she couldn't recognize, and his job when the late nights and missed deadlines piled too high. Seattle's skyline didn't look like progress to him anymore. It looked like reminders of everything he used to have and everything he couldn't fix. Just as he was about to cross the street, someone brushed past him. A woman in a yellow raincoat, her hair escaping in loose curls around her face. Her laughter carried faintly under her breath as she tried to shield her coffee from the rain. For a split second, she looked back, and their eyes met. Hers were bright and alive, like sunlight breaking through gray. Something inside Ethan paused. He didn't know why. It wasn't attraction in the ordinary sense. It was something gentler, deeper, something that whispered, maybe not everything's lost. Cloud, if you believe in kindness, in healing, and in the small moments that can change everything. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Because sometimes, hope arrives when you least expect it. Cloud. Ethan shook his head, trying to focus. He entered the office building, took the elevator up, and sat in the waiting area. But his thoughts kept circling back to the girl in the yellow raincoat. There was something about her, maybe her calmness, maybe her warmth, that had briefly drowned out the noise in his head. When his name was finally called, he stood up, palms sweating, heart racing, his reflection in the glass wall looking like a man halfway between breaking and rebuilding. The interview didn't go well. His voice cracked. He stumbled over answers. The manager smiled politely, but Ethan could already see the polite dismissal forming in their eyes. When it was over, he stepped out into the street again, feeling the drizzle soak into his shoes. His chest felt heavy, like the weight of all his past failures was pressing down again. He wanted to scream, but instead, he just walked. He ended up at a small coffee shop he used to visit with his parents when he was younger, Willow and Company. The bell above the door chimed softly as he stepped inside. It smelled of cinnamon and old wood, and for the first time in months, something about it felt like safety. He ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, staring at the raindrops racing down the glass. Then he heard a voice, familiar, soft, and warm. "You look nervous." He turned, startled. It was her, the girl in the yellow raincoat. She stood beside his table, holding her own cup, smiling with that same calm, kind expression that had briefly stopped his world earlier that morning. Before he could respond, she pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Her name was Lila Monroe. She was a social worker, as he would soon learn, helping teenagers who had fallen through the cracks. She wasn't afraid of silence. She seemed to understand it. When she spoke, it wasn't with pity, it was with presence. "You were at the building across the street earlier," she said. I recognized the look. The interview kind. Ethan chuckled weakly. "Yeah, you could say it didn't go well." She tilted her head, eyes gentle but unflinching. "Still, you showed up. Most people don't even make it that far." He didn't know why, but something about her words broke something open inside him. He confessed more than he intended, about his parents, his fiancée, the job he lost, the nights he spent staring at ceilings wondering how he'd become so small. Lila listened without interruption, her hands cupped around her mug, her expression never shifting to judgment. When he finally fell silent, she smiled, a small, luminous smile that felt like light through fog. "You know," she said softly, "you look nervous, but I think it's because you still care." People who stop caring don't shake anymore. Ethan laughed quietly. You sound like a therapist. Social worker, she said. Close enough. But really, I just notice people who remind me of hope. He blinked, caught off guard. Hope? She nodded. Yeah, sometimes hope doesn't look happy. It looks like someone who's scared but still shows up. Like you. Something inside him, fragile but alive, flickered. And before he could stop himself, he smiled for the first time in weeks. Then maybe I'm nervous, he said, because you look like hope. Her laugh was soft, but it lingered in the air like a melody. Over the next few weeks, they saw each other often. Sometimes by coincidence, sometimes by quiet intention. She would leave notes on his coffee cup. One more sunrise. Don't miss it. He'd reply by leaving her wildflowers on her table. For someone who brings color to gray days. Little by little, Ethan found himself changing. He started applying for jobs again. Not because he was desperate, but because he wanted to try. He began jogging in the mornings, eating properly, even picking up his old guitar again. One evening, as the city bathed in the pink glow of sunset, he found himself walking her home. The air smelled of rain and lilac. Lila spoke about her work, about the kids she tried to help, kids who had lost faith in tomorrow. It's hard, she admitted, to keep telling people to believe when sometimes you're barely holding on yourself. Ethan looked at her then, really looked, and realized hope didn't mean perfection. It meant surviving long enough to find light again. A month later, Ethan got a call, a job offer. A small local nonprofit wanted him to help with community outreach, designing programs to get struggling youth back on their feet. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful, and it felt right. He called Lila the moment he heard the news. She picked up breathless with excitement. You did it, she said. See what happens when you stop doubting the sunrise. But life, as it often does, had its own rhythm, one that didn't always dance to joy. 2 weeks later, Lila didn't show up for their usual coffee. Then another day passed. Then 3. Finally, Ethan went to the community center where she worked. Her colleague recognized him immediately, and her expression faltered. Lila's in the hospital, she said quietly. She collapsed during an outreach trip. They said it's her heart. Ethan's body went cold. He rushed to the hospital, the rain once again following him like a curse. When he reached her room, she was asleep, pale but peaceful. Machines beeped softly beside her. He sat beside her bed for hours, his hand over hers, whispering the same words she once told him. One more sunrise. Don't miss it. When she woke, her eyes fluttered open and softened at the sight of him. You look nervous, she murmured weakly. He smiled through tears. Because you still look like hope. She laughed faintly, squeezing his hand. Then don't lose that, okay? Even if I can't keep walking with you. Her heart condition had been there all along, she explained quietly, a congenital defect she'd learned to live with. The doctors were uncertain how long she had, but Lila seemed unafraid. I've had my share of rain, she said, but I got to see a few people smile again. That's enough. Ethan stayed by her side through it all. He read her poetry, played his guitar softly at night, and told her stories about the kids he was helping, stories that made her eyes light up even when her strength faded. The day she passed, the rain finally stopped. The city looked washed clean, the streets glistening under morning light. Ethan stood outside her favorite coffee shop, Willow and Company, holding her yellow raincoat, the one she'd left in his car weeks earlier. He hung it on the chair where she always sat. Then he whispered, "You were right. Hope doesn't disappear. It changes hands." He continued her work, running workshops, visiting shelters, helping young people believe in another chance. Whenever he felt afraid, he'd remember her voice. People who still shake haven't given up yet. Months later, during a youth event at the community center, a teenage girl asked him why he seemed so calm when life looked so uncertain. Ethan smiled gently. Because someone once told me hope isn't a promise. It's a choice. You just have to keep showing up, even when you're scared. As the evening sky dimmed, he looked out the window, and for a moment, he swore he saw her, a flash of yellow, a soft laugh in the wind. Maybe it was memory. Maybe it was faith. But it felt real enough to make him smile. Sparkles, if this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Hopeful Stories. Your support keeps these real and emotional journeys alive for others who need them. Sparkles. Speech balloon before you go. Comment below. What does hope look like to you? Because sometimes hope isn't a thing you find. It's a person who reminds you to believe again.